Ladies and gentlemen, it is once again my distinct pleasure to welcoming all of you to special workshop 28, Meet the Author on Cosmopolitanism, State Sovereignty and International Law and Politics. So it's basically what we're doing here, a roast, and subject to our roast is this young gentleman over there, my dear friend Jorge Núñez, who has done something extraordinary. Because as we are all painfully aware of, we live in interesting times. And it's interesting times shaped by conflict and strife. And this is, of course, a very burden-laden age for humanity against that backdrop. However, the good news is there is one book, and only one book, that will help us overcome our difficulties, that will help us basically resolve any conflict, and will lead humanity to an even brighter future. And this is, of course, the book that we are going to talk about today. What Jorge does in this book, everybody, of course, has already read the book. But for those who, having read the book, forgot the basic tenets. What Jorge does in this book is a wonderful essay in trying to reconcile cosmopolitanism on the one hand and state sovereignty on the other hand by perceiving them not necessarily as antagonistic concepts, but as concepts that are well positioned to accommodate one another, if only we were to employ what he would call a multi-dimensional view. And against the backdrop of this multi-dimensional view, cosmopolitanism and state sovereignty may well be dissolved in a cooperative effort, if said effort is only guided by structural principles of universal law that Jorge kindly outlines for us at the very end of this volume, and which will, I think, be a guide not only for international politics, but also for, this is the third as many volumes, but he's working the fourth already. But when he's I think arrived at the sixth or so, he will have fleshed out all the universal law that he's only now outlined on a structural level. This is a very promising effort. It is a very optimistic effort. It is an effort that is undertaken by somebody who truly is a lawyer, and a lawyer of the positivist variety, however, who is always willing and very much able to look beyond the borders, not only of the nation state, but also beyond the borders of his own discipline, which allows him to take this multifaceted view of things that should allow us to come to this coordinated effort that should facilitate the reconciliation of cosmopolitanism and state sovereignty. However, we have found three fearless academics who have either something to criticize or something to add to this wonderful effort that Jorge has undertaken. And these three fearless academics are with us today. They're Pierluigi here, Oscar over there, and Gabriel is seated over there. What we will do now for this public roast event, basically, is that our fearless critics will first and foremost outline their criticism for each, let's say, 10 to 15 minutes. Then Jorge will have a say for not more than 5 minutes, Jorge. They will be given 2 minutes for a brief rebuttal, and then I shall, after each of the presenters, open up to a general discussion with the audience. And that should provide us with 2 not only enlightening, but also very joyful hours. That having said and explained, without further ado, Pierluigi, he's all yours.
Thank you very much. to everybody. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here, to be invited by Jorge to discuss his book. And my approach will be to consider Jorge's book as a contribution to promote universal peace. Of course, the book deals or pretends to deal with all the basic scourges of mankind, like poverty, human rights violations, etc. But he also addresses the problem of territorial disputes, conflict of sovereignty, and war. And so, from this point of view, that's the point of view I will use to present you his proposal. And since I consider this proposal as belonging to the tradition of proposals having to do with universal peace, a tradition which starts from L'Abbé de Saint-Pierre and Kant and others, I will compare Jorge's proposal with another recent proposal which can be read for universal peace, which is Luigi Ferraioli's A Plea for a Constitution of the Earth, which is a 2022 published book. So 2022, 2024, two recent contributions to this problem. So I will proceed in this way. Three parts. In the first part, I will provide an account of Jorge's proposal. In the second part, I will provide an account, always, again, very swift, of Ferraioli's proposal. And in the third part, I'll try to make a comparison between Jorge and Ferraioli's proposals from the standpoint of three different forms of pacifism. So let's start with Jorge's proposal. Already the chair of this seminar has told a lot, but we may say that Jorge proposals also for promoting peace has to do with the idea of creating a universal law which is binding for states and is supported by a global organization which should be effective, contrary-wise to, says Jorge, the European Union, the NATO, and other United Nations organizations, which so far are pretty ineffective. And we see that the recent invasion of Ukraine by Russia is a clear case where the system of international control on war and peace failed totally. So what are the basic ingredients of Jorge's model? I think that first of all, we must focus on two basic assumptions which Jorge makes. The first is, he says, we must accept the fact that states will not give up their sovereignty. So there is a sovereignty assumption, the fact of sovereign assumption, of state sovereignty. And the second claim is the cosmopolitan claim, according to which, says Jorge, we must acknowledge that individuals should have a minimum set of guarantees protected in law regardless of their individual circumstances. Now, these two assumptions somehow affects the normative content of Jorge proposals, because from the first assumption, the fact of states' sovereignty, Jorge derives, I may say in a technical way, derives the principle that universal law ought to pay respect for states' sovereignty. So, respect for state sovereignty is one ingredient, normative ingredient of a universal law as Jorge presents. While the other ingredient, the cosmopolitan, adds a different normative principle that, in a sense, respect for cosmopolitan ideal of guaranteeing to every individual inside of any state and also contrary to the state's own will, certain basic rights, the access to certain basic goods. So armed with these basic assumptions and basic principles, Jorge makes up a proposal for a universal law, which I think he presents as something that should meet four requirements. Coordination, irenicism, plurality of axiologically equal basic principles, and value pluralism. Four aspects. First, coordination. According to Jorge, universal law should be a legal system in tune with a coordination between all national legal orders and international law. This involves the rejection of any fixed hierarchical relation between universal law on the one hand and national legal orders and international law on the other. In Jorge's own words, any universal law arrangement must avoid domination or hegemonic power of any kind. Hence, universal law is not a question about the subordination of national law, international law, nationalism, and imperialism against pacifism, but of coordination by means of balancing different interests at stake. Irenicism. I call irenicism the second feature of the universal law model Jorge proposes, because is the idea that the universal law should embrace the respect for state sovereignty with respect for cosmopolitan ideals. And this embracing should, be like combining state sovereignty with a minimum set of enforceable legal guarantees for every individual, plus a certain level of coordination between national legal orders and international law. And notice, this embracement should ensure that states could retain their sovereignty and individuals would benefit from guarantees recognized beyond jurisdictional difference, like certain basic rights and access to some vital goods like food, water, and shelter. Third, plurality of axiologically equal basic principles. So the gist, the nucleus of a universal law, according to Jorge, the one from which we should start, or states should start in creating it, in co-creating it, is a set of 5 principles, which is the principle of acceptability, the principle of humanity, the principle of efficacy, the principle of simplicity, and the principle of balancing. Acceptability is a principle directly mirroring the respect for states' sovereignty principle. It says that it requires that any cosmopolitan benefit to individuals be accepted by all the sovereign states involved. So acceptability. Humanity gets its content and validity from the basic normative component of respect for the legal cosmopolitanism of individuals. And it requires granting to an individual a set of basic rights, but notice, it requires granting to any individual a set of basic rights on the basis of a set of substantive principles of law or rules agreed on by all the sovereign states. So humanity is somehow balanced, already balanced by acceptability. Then there is efficacy. Of course, a universal law should be granted efficacy, but again, efficacy cannot but depend. Jorge is a realist in a matter of international relations and politics. And for efficacy cannot but depend by the fact that states agree on establishing a global organization endowed with effective powers of enforcing, say, a certain right against state will in favor of state subjects. The principle of simplicity requires universal law to avoid precise rules and be made of standards, of flexible rules, which can be applied in a flexible way by courts at the domestic, regional, and international level. And finally, there is a principle of balancing. Again, the principle of balancing requires that any legal output, any legal decision, judicial decision, piece of universal law should be the output of a balancing between states' interest and cosmopolitanism. And so we come to the last aspect, the last requirement of universal law, which I call value pluralism, but maybe could also be called value relativism in a sense. Because for, I would say, matter of political realism, Jorge thinks that the universal law should not be committed to liberal values. So which values and so which rights will be protected by the cosmopolitan ingredient of universal law is not necessarily the protection of the traditional liberal rights to, I don't know, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, no? But any individual will get just the rights that states accept they will get. So we have value pluralism, and I would say, but this is a question I pose to Jorge right now, there is a sort of presupposed value relativism and acceptance of the idea according to which liberal values are somehow the expression of a form of imperialistic politics in international politics. And so we should be suspicious about them. But this, I'm asking Jorge to make clear this point. Let's move to the other model, the model of Ferraioli. So this is the model of Jorge. I hope to have provided a fair account of it, but we'll discuss. Ferraioli makes a plea for a constitution of the earth. So the idea are the following. First, any human being is entitled to the effective protection and guarantee of a set of fundamental liberty, social, political, and civil rights. And these fundamental rights include, to mention just a few, the right to life, the right to physical and psychical integrity, the right to personal freedom in its several dimensions, so also freedom of thought, for instance, freedom of conscience, the right to health, the right to education, the right to subsistence, the right to personal security and be free, and the free development of one's personality. A second point is that any human being is entitled to an effective and adequate access to certain fundamental goods. Three sorts of fundamental goods should be procured: natural vital goods, artificial vital goods, and strictly personal goods. Natural vital goods encompass clean air, potable water, rivers, seas, great forests, aerial space, electromagnetic waves, extra-atmosphere space, and notice the moon and other celestial bodies. And this is quite strange as a claim, but the idea is that every individual, we have a right, an individual right, also to these goods. So this good cannot be appropriated by a certain state because they belong to everybody, and nobody can think to, I don't know, colonize the moon to its own profit. That's the idea. Third, the earth, notice, the earth belongs as a common house to every living being. So to every human being, to animals and to plants. every human being is a citizen of the earth. So we find here a cosmopolitan ingredient, like we had in Jorge, no? The idea of every individual being the citizen of the earth. And notice the human beings living together on the earth make up the people of the earth. The people of the earth. And now the first point concerns sovereignty. Sovereignty, according to Ferraioli, is not a property of states, but it's property of individuals. Individuals are sovereign in the sense that they first, everybody of us as members of the people of the earth are the owner of the earth. So we are sovereign upon the earth. And this means, according to Ferraioli, that we have this sovereignty, which is a mirror of a sovereignty we have inside of our states, where we are sovereign because the fundamental power, in Ferraioli's view, does not belong to the state, but does belong pro quota to every subject of a state. This is a pretty revolutionary way of looking at things. Then, surely, sovereignty upon the earth does not belong to the states, but to the people of the earth. Then, 6, the states have no intrinsic moral value. The states are not ends in themselves. The states are but the instruments for the local guarantee of the fundamental rights of their subjects. There is no legitimate room for any reason of state not in tune with the duty, and I emphasize the duty, of states to protect the fundamental rights of a subject and provide them with adequate access to fundamental vital goods. 7, the people of the earth, any people in the earth, and any individual, that means each of us, has a fundamental right to peace. A fundamental right to peace. So peace becomes from a matter of states politics to a fundamental individual right. Not only of individuals, but also of every people severally and the people of the earth. And so that says as a corresponding position a duty of states to abstain from war. War is illegitimate from this point of view. Any war, in principle, is illegitimate. Though the position of Ferraioli would be of a moderate pacifism, not an extreme one, but this we'll see. And so, concerning peace, the way to guarantee this right to peace everybody has is by means of a set of measures that includes, first, a universal wholesale prohibition of the production and commerce of weapons, except for the weapons necessary for police function inside of any state or the international state. Second, the universal suppression of national armies. Third, the duty of any state to abstain from war and submit any controversy with other states to the mandatory jurisdiction of an international court of justice. D, the establishing of an international criminal court competent to judge state agents for crimes against peace. And finally, the establishing of a court of systemic crimes competent to judge situations where a war, for instance, has been waged in a way which is not amenable to individual responsibilities. So this is basically the second model. And now let's make a little bit of comparison. I just hurry to the conclusion. I said that my comparison would be from a standpoint of 3 forms of pacifism. These are institutional pacifism, instrumental pacifism, and ethical pacifism. this distinction we find in many writings of Norberto Bobbio on peace and war. Institutional pacifism is the position which purport to promote universal peace by means of legal institutions. Instrumental pacifism is the position, the pacifist position, according to which peace should be promoted by intervening on the tools to make wars, like armies, weapons production. And third, ethical pacifism has to do with educating people to peace, to consider peace an intrinsic good and consider war, as Hans Kelsen declared in his 1944 treatise, mass murder, one of the worst disgrace of our culture. So, from this point of view, we may come to the following conclusions. First, both the Universal Law Project and the Global Constitutional Project are two forms, I would say, of realistic utopias. They are utopias because they argue for bettering the world we have. So they want to promote a different state of affairs which is better for everybody. They are realistic because both try to be at the base of a process which starts from existing institutions, existing laws, international convention, etc. Saying that, let's see how they fare from a point of view of pacifism. Both the universal law approach and global constitutionalism are an example of institutional pacifism, because in both cases, legal instruments are considered as tools to promote peace, to promote the solution of wars, to promote a universal peace among the peoples. But I think that the model of Jorge stops here. So is a pacifist in an institutional sense. But it is not pacifist neither in the instrumental sense nor in the ethical sense. Not in the instrumental, because there is at least no clear position about weapons, which about national armies, and which is an idea, by the way, which was supported by Kant in his 1797 treaty for a perpetual peace. And there is no trace of ethical pacifism, because in Ferraioli, ethical pacifism somehow looms back the idea of a fundamental right to peace of every individual. This is as a powerful educating function, I think. And the idea of getting rid totally of the idea of state sovereignty. There is a rejection of it. There is no state sovereignty, but the power necessary to protect individual rights. Notice this kind of thing. So I think that the difference is this. We have two models for universal peace. One is in tune with institutional pacifism. The other one is in tune not only with institutional pacifism, but also with instrumental and ethical. And I stop here. Thank you very much.